Well, again, it's based on lots of factors. Government debt means that taxes are going to have to go up next year. Public sector spending is going to be cut, and that's going to affect Northern Ireland a greater part than any other region in the country. Home repossessions, there's going to be lots of buy-to-letters putting their properties in the market over the next 12 months because they can't increase their rents, but mortgage rates are rising, and so on. And because the Northern Ireland prices rose so dramatically, way beyond anything else that happened in the United Kingdom. And finally, in relation to average incomes in Northern Ireland, prices are still absolutely crazy, even though they're slightly less crazy than 2 years ago. Personally, I wouldn't go and get into property buying right now. When you consider what you can rent compared to the cost of a mortgage, and by the way, you say a 10% mortgage, but you can get cheaper mortgages with a higher deposit. But I certainly wouldn't put down only a 10% deposit on the basis that I believe that property is going to go down to 30 to 40.
Sarah Jane, why buy rather than rent?
Because it's £500 a month to rent, and for an extra £150 a month we can buy a house. You know, and that's our house, whereas rent, it's not our house.
No, it's not. It's not your house. Well, it's 90% owned by the bank.
But we can do what we want to the property, if you know what I mean. We can decorate, you know, like it's not as easy whenever you're renting. You have to go through your landlord for everything, so...
Well, that's certainly true, but on a purely financial basis, and all I can do is comment on the finances, on a purely financial, my personal opinion and professional opinion is don't touch property with a barge pole for the time being. And it's not just 6 months, it's actually 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Paddy, thank you, Sarah. Paddy in West Belfast. Morning, Paddy.
How you doing? Is that gentleman still there?
He is, yes.
Tell me this. Were you given this advice a couple of years ago?
Yes.
You were?
So that's put your argument into touch, hasn't it?
Sorry?
The answer is yes.
The reason being is, why was that not heard?
Because there were literally something like 20 or 30 people saying property was going to go up compared to the very few people like me who were saying that property was going to go down. And they had a far bigger voice in the media than people like I did.
Right, okay. Now, the reason why I'm asking you this is simply, not that I'm disbelieving you. When people are dealing with banks, and there's a level of expertise and knowledge, and that expertise and knowledge
the banks
not there.
Have just lost hundreds of billions of pounds. They made loans to people who couldn't afford them. They made loans to businesses who couldn't afford them. I question how much expertise there is in our banks.
Well, that's the reason I'm saying to you. We as consumers go to banks and people like yourself for advice, and the advice we are given is given on the basis of a high level of expertise.
Well, you need to look at exactly what the expertise is, because there is a difference in financial advice between advice and selling. And there are ways to differentiate.
I understand that, but what I'm trying to say is that if you go to a mortgage shop, right, and you're given advice, and you're also helped through the various hurdles to get a piece of property, you're been given that. You're taking that information based on the fact that these people have a level of expertise.
Come on, Paddy, but you're a grown man. If you're buying a house to make a profit yourself. And you should be...
No, Stephen, hold on.
On.
Look, you're Stephen, don't be playing this with me.
But Paddy, you can't...
Now, listen to what I'm saying.
Paddy, you cannot expect a bank to tell you what investment decisions to make. That's an individual choice.
Hold on, Stephen. People generally were not, unless you were a speculator, were not buying some long-term investment. They were buying homes. They were buying houses to live in.
And what actually happened was people didn't go to the banks and mortgage brokers and say, do you think that I should buy this? No, they went to them saying, I want to buy this, help me with the mortgage. That's because not the advisors giving advice. That's them selling a product.
Yes,
and it's
but
a very different thing.
Yes, you're explaining it from the expertise financial end of things. Let me explain it from the ordinary people on the ground. People seeing houses in Belfast in particular rising by 5-7% a month through the year, and they said, if I don't make a move now, I am not going to be able to afford a house. And then we're talking about houses, not financial investments. It was getting on the housing ladder.
Okay, here's some of the emails coming in this morning. Someone writes to me and says, Stephen, I'm one of the people who has signed a contract to buy an apartment in the Ormeau Bakery. I signed this mid-2007. Now I can only get a mortgage for about 40% of the original price, taking into account a 47% fall in price. And a 75% mortgage, I simply cannot raise the money. I understand the developer spent a lot of time and money to complete the apartments, but surely he cannot expect to make the same amount of profit he would have made if the units were finished in 2007. I'm appealing, says this emailer, for the developer to talk to us so we can come to some sort of compromise, and for anyone who can help us to get in touch with your show. Many thanks, worried sick. That just sums up some of the pressure that's on these people. We're asking the developer to come onto the programme today. The number 08459 555 678. Mervyn writes to me, says, Stephen, great show on the telly last night. As with all the bankers, they want to pass the buck and blame everything on the global situation. The global influence hasn't helped. However, is it possible to get a banker or politician to answer the following, says Mervyn? Back in 1978, I applied to a building society for a mortgage to buy my first house. I was offered an amount 2.5 times my salary. It was a struggle to get them to take a fraction of my wife's salary into account. I also had to put down a 10% deposit. 2 years ago, I could have had a mortgage 5 times my salary. No hassle, no deposit. Now, Mervyn asks, what happened in the intervening years? The ratio must have gone up gradually over those years. Plenty of time for the money men to look at how the economy was performing. Why was this ridiculous increase allowed, and who made the decision to allow it? It had to be either politicians or bankers, says Mervyn. Can you get a top banker, tie him to a chair, get him to answer these simple questions? No one saw this coming. It doesn't wash. Also, I'm disgusted, says Mervyn, that no representative of my own bank, the Ulster Bank, appeared on your TV show. Can you confirm they were invited to appear, and if possible, any response to such invitation? Yes, I can, Mervyn. I can tell you we asked the Ulster Bank to appear on the TV show last night. I'm not even sure if they got back to us. If they did, they certainly said no, that they did not want to speak to their customers. They did not want to speak to Ulster Bank customers on that TV show last night. They want to take your money. They want to take your mortgages. They do not want to speak to you on that TV show last night. To be fair to the First Trust Bank, they said, we want to come on the TV. We want to talk to our customers. We want to apologise for what we've done wrong. To answer your question, Mervyn, Ulster Bank said no, no, no. Economist John Simpson. Morning to you, Economist John Simpson.
Good morning, Squire.
Good morning to you. Well, a lot of heat this morning. People, to be honest with you, the way this is loading today, very little sympathy for speculators who tried to make a fast buck and are now going to be bankrupt.
I well understand both the tension saying no sympathy and the other people who say a lot of sympathy. This is an impossible position to be in. And in fact, as I listen to the discussion, I think there's coming through it the possibility of the compromise. The developers have got to pay the builders. If they don't pay the builders will sue the developers. The developers have got to get their money in, and they want therefore the contracts fulfilled. Somewhere in that sequence, we're facing the danger that we could have individuals going bankrupt, we could have developers going bankrupt, and we could have builders not being paid and then laying off workers. This is why it actually needs somebody in the middle. And one of the solicitors earlier this morning was suggesting you need an arrangement whereby people are actually put into a position where they pay and they have a continuing mortgage for what they can afford, and the rest is put into some sort of a kitty where there's an obligation. They don't get the full equity on the property until such times in the years to come when they're able to make up the difference. We've got to get something to keep the thing going so that we don't actually just put everybody out on the street, both literally and metaphorically.
John, what should you do now then if you're in a situation you've got a writ at the door?
If you've got a writ at the door, the law is the law. Whether you're a speculator, which gets one set of emotions, or whether you're a genuine home buyer, it's the same law. And the writs will be taken to the court, and the court may decide to say to you, you've got an obligation here, and it'll ask you what arrangements you can make. Can you sell some of your assets? don't forget, some people will actually be in a position what they'll be forced to do is to sell something else or to raise money from somewhere else so as to make up the difference. It's the people who can't do any of this who are the real hard luck cases. But we'll actually see this all begin to work over a period of time. And I think what we need is to avoid it becoming just too harsh. You know, bailiffs, well, we keep hearing there are no bailiffs in Northern Ireland. We don't actually evict people. Irish history tells us that that's not a good thing to do. But we will see a situation where people are put under tremendous trauma because the law is the law. And I think it's now, the solicitors suggest the developer and the potential buyers need to get together and some arrangement needs to be made to postpone the actual full payment to give a deferred payment and to allow the people to complete the contracts with the expectation that over time they'll pay the difference.
Do you blame the banks in this?
I think we've got to be careful about what we say about the banks. You know, you on your show last night, we talked about bailing the banks out. Can I just correct that? What the government has done, it has bailed all of us citizens out, because if the banks had gone bankrupt, you would have had hundreds of us to talk to about the fact that our bank deposits had been wiped out. We couldn't allow, as a community, we couldn't allow the banks to go bankrupt. If I were a bank shareholder, I would say the government didn't do much for me because my shares are not worth much. As a bank depositor, my small deposit, I'm very grateful. I'm glad the government did what it did, because I couldn't have really liked the thought that that deposit would have been wiped out. We've kept the banks in being because we've got customers. We haven't kept the banks in being so as to pay their shareholders. Now, I won't go down the road on the bonuses because I think the banks there have got something to explain. But in terms of where we are, I think we first of all have to have some understanding, okay, not sympathy, but some understanding with where the banks are. And equally, we've got to understand that the main commercial banks and the main building societies have been behaving according to their rule books. There are some fringe secondary financial institutions who have actually spoilt the reputation for the more conventional banks. So I would say of our four main clearing banks, for example, and our main building societies, we shouldn't be pointing the finger at them saying that they were doing something naughty or something they shouldn't have done. They've actually tried to behave responsibly against a set of circumstances which was not of their making.
Jonathan Davis this morning, John Simpson, is predicting another 30 to 40% fall in property prices.
On that, I mean, I would rarely feel so strongly as to say somebody's wrong. But on this particular point, I do feel strong enough to say he's wrong. The Northern Ireland house price relativity. Yes, we went in a period of 2 years, we went from a cheap region to being the dearest house prices on average across the UK. In the last year, we have come back down again, and Jonathan actually agrees this much, that we have house prices in Northern Ireland have fallen and have come back, so they're now about the level of the GB average. Now, there's still some way to go, but there's not 30 or 40%. If 30 or 40% further fall were to happen, I cannot envisage the circumstances that would justify that. We can actually talk now about whether within another 5 or 10%, one way or the other, the major change in house prices, I think, is over. And I wouldn't be talking about 30 or 40% further fall.
Jonathan?
Well, all I can say is 99 out of 100 professional economists got it wrong, and I so far have got it right.
99 will one day get it right, and I might be just the 99th.
Jonathan, what's the evidence that you have to predict a 30-40% fall?
Well, of course, we don't have evidence of what's going to happen in the future, but to restate why I believe that house prices nationally have still got a long way to go and why Northern Ireland is going to go down further. One, we have the biggest government peacetime debt in history. At some point, the global markets who lend money to our government, the Bank of England, are going to say, we're not going to keep on lending you all this money, gargantuan sums of money at just 4% interest. We want more. We're going to charge more. We're going to charge a higher interest rate, which means that in due course, for years, our interest rates are going to rise. Imagine the effect on mortgages of rising and rising mortgage rates. 2, unemployment is rising nationally. nearly 100,000 a month. It's gone up 750,000 in the last 9 months. It's forecasted to go up roughly 750,000 in the next 9 months. Think about that. A doubling in unemployment in 2 years. You never get sustainably rising house prices when you have rising unemployment. 3, repossessions have actually only been slowed down because of government stimulus, 0.5% Bank of England rate. Once interest rates start rising, you just see the number of repossessions going through the roof. 4, buy-to-letters are struggling. We know that. Once interest rates start rising, you'll see them offload by the barrel full. There'll be a massive oversupply to demand. That's what we already know. Now look forward to what we can expect. The next general election is going to be just around the corner. We pretty well can determine that there's going to be an increase in taxes because I don't see any other way of paying off the government debt. And on top of that, there's going to be a big cut in public sector spending. There are lots of others, but those are the main issues.
Has he got any of
that
wrong?
And of course, on top of that, government stimulus will cease at some point.
John Simpson?
Household debt is still huge. Pensions and house prices are down. Bank bad debts are huge. There are lots of reasons why the macro picture is dismal, and it will be dismal for many years. And I just don't understand how other people, so-called professionals, can't see what is so obvious.
Stephen, can I come back on that?
Of course you can.
The essential trends, of course Jonathan's right. Borrowing needs to be brought into check. Government spending needs to be brought into check. What I think Jonathan is doing is saying that we haven't already engaged in a major correction in terms of the housing market. Yes.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm only saying we've had the first leg.
I didn't interrupt you.
Hold on, let's hear what he's saying, Jonathan.
What I was saying was Jonathan got the main trends right. But what I would disagree with him on, and I'll join the other 99% of the economists in saying it, is that we thought that it would go another 30 or 40% is simply being far too strong an exaggeration. We have an adjustment taking place. People's behaviour has begun to adjust. We actually now have an economy that is actually bottoming out in so many different respects. Yes, it's going to be painful, I'm not denying that. But in fact, what I don't want to do is to put a further big scare factor where in fact all we need is to be more as realistic as we can be.
Yeah, I think look, some people are saying this on the text this morning. Saying, Nolan, thanks very much. I've got a house. I'm trying to sell it. You're doing nothing for the property market in Northern Ireland. Well, all we're doing is discussing it, for goodness sake. Another, what idiots buy a property without a mortgage in place beforehand? This is greed, pure and simple. Another, we're building office blocks, flats, and they're lying idle. And we see down south lessons should have been learnt, but we have people still wanting to buy houses with no job security, just driven by greed, says Norman. Stephen, could your man on the show help me? I bought in Bulgaria 5 years ago. The apartment is now worth €80,000. I owe money on it. It's paid for I don't owe money on it. It's paid for 3 years ago. I bought another apartment off plan. It should be worth over €110,000. Now it's ready. I can't even get a €50,000 mortgage. I don't owe anything in this country. I cannot borrow against it. Solicitors are coining it at the minute. They must be rubbing their hands, says Maria. You've no chance of getting a developer onto the show, says Chris. Another, having this guy on your show is only scaring people. Do absolutely nothing to get properties moving again. I'm in dire straits with my own property. Thanks for nothing. Another, I know several people who bought apartments, but as an investment, slap it up them. It's a gamble, and they lost. Dry your eyes. 08459 555 678. David, morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Stephen.
Morning. You were in the audience last night, David.
Yes, that's right.
And you are a property developer, is that right?
Yeah, I'm a house builder, Stephen. We've built for over 100 years, and I've built up to 150 homes in any 1 year.
The service you called has cleared.
Right, David, we're clear.
The service you called has cleared.
David, are you still there? Okay, we're clearly having a problem on that line. Sorry about that. Nigel in Belfast. Morning, Nigel.
Morning, Stephen.
Morning, Nigel.
Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning to you. Former bank manager, now a debt advisor.
That's right. Well, basically, I run a company called Debt Control Limited. We act as a business consultant to the small business sector. really assisting them in the management of their cash flow and raising finance from banks and other investors. But over the last 12 months, the credit crunch has a major impact on the small business sector.